welcome to the Better Birth podcast. Today I'm talking to the wonderful Laura from Plus Size Pregnancy, and we're going to be talking about high BMI pregnancies and water births. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit first before we dive in? That's a really bad pun. I'm really sorry. That was really...
I love it. Yeah, of course. Hi, I'm Laura. I'm the founder, owner, voice behind Plus Size Pregnancy. I started Plus Size Pregnancy in 2021 after my two plus size pregnancies. When I had my son, I was plus size, but I didn't really realize there was anything different about my pregnancy. And then when I was pregnant with my daughter a couple of years later, even though it was the same hospital, same staff, same everything, because I was more plus size, everything was very, very different from the very beginning. It was very much, you're going to be under consultant-led care, you're going to need a GTT, you're going to have additional growth scans. And straight away, because obviously by then I was already a trained hypnobirthing instructor, I was like, oh my God, research. There's nowhere to go. There's not a single place where you can find good evidence-based information. So I really quickly realized something like plus size pregnancy was needed, so that people did have somewhere to go and to speak to someone who understands how different it is when perhaps, other people that you're related to or your friends don't understand what it's like going through the system, and how different it is just because of the size of your body. So yeah, I started plus size pregnancy, and so far it's been wonderful.
And it's so needed, like you said, it's so needed because there isn't a good, reliable source of information. I direct everybody to you if I have
thanks.
asks anything. But before we start talking about water birth, because before we go any further, I just want to say that there is another podcast episode which we've recorded, isn't there, talking about high BMI pregnancies and why BMI is, quite frankly, utter rubbish. So if people haven't listened to that one, they need to go back and listen to that one before they listen to this one. But I wanted to specifically talk about water birth and access to water to give birth in, because it is a challenge for people who are deemed high risk, and having a high BMI pregnancy, you get told that you are high risk. But before we start talking about that, do you want to just bring us up to speed on why being classed as high BMI is utter rubbish in terms of a risk factor?
Yeah, of course. So BMI is a calculation made based on our height and weight, but it was created almost 200 years ago by a man who specifically himself even said it's never to be used by the medical field, and it's never to be used as a measurement of a person's health. Yet here we are, judged, labelled, told we're high risk. So in a way made to feel as though our bodies are dangerous because of the BMI chart. All it takes into account is your height and weight, which don't mean anything at all. It doesn't take into account your genetics. It doesn't take into account your race. It doesn't take into account bones, muscles, nothing. Literally just height and weight, which don't tell anybody anything about you. So BMI is absolute crap, and it was never intended to be used in the way that it is. So really, it shouldn't be. I get lots of healthcare professionals message me on places like Instagram saying, well, what alternative should we use? Individualized care is the only alternative that you can use, because there isn't one, and there shouldn't be one, because we shouldn't be judged just because of our weight or just because of, again, our BMI. It doesn't make any sense. It's not a way to measure a person's health.
Yeah, and it's true, isn't it? It isn't a way to measure someone's health, because it doesn't take into account, for example, somebody could have a high BMI, be a bodybuilder, have amazing heart health because they go to the gym all the time and be really, really fit, and be classed as high risk because they have a high BMI, versus somebody who is smaller, weighs less, and does zero exercise, eats loads of crap, are really, really unhealthy, and probably are higher risk than the person who's classed as high BMI, high risk. So it doesn't, it's
Yeah.
rubbish.
Yeah, it makes no sense. It makes no sense. It's just fat phobic, and most policies surrounding BMI aren't evidence-based, because statistically, plus-size pregnant people are far more likely to have a completely straightforward pregnancy and birth than they are to have something negative happen. So, the same with slim people. They're far more likely to have a completely straightforward pregnancy and birth than they are for something bad to happen. And I think what happens a lot as well is plus-size people are made to feel as though if something does happen, it's purely because of their body. It's purely because of their BMI. Oh, that's what caused it, which is not true. There's not a single pregnancy-related issue that happens just to plus-size people. Not a single one. But people are made to feel as though that's not the case.
Yeah. So what's the kind of cutoff? What's the benchmark to be classed as high BMI?
So it's generally 30, because according to the BMI chart, that's what would be labelled as obese, air quotes. So that's what makes the change. Literally, those categories are what makes the difference to our pathway of care that we receive.
So when you are classed as high risk, you're classed as having a high BMI pregnancy. For a lot of people, that does mean that they lose access to water, access to the birth center, access to a birthing pool. So do you want to explain a little bit why do we take away options from high BMI pregnant people, like access to water?
There's not really a reason. In all honesty, there's not really there's not really a reason. It's just fat phobia. It's almost made up stuff. Like, let's face it, a lot of policies are written out of fear of litigation. So no one wants to get sued for any reason. So they almost pull up and make up statistics and information out of nowhere. So with regards to water births, things that come up time and time and time again are, we won't be able to get you out of the water in an emergency. That's one. And it's ridiculous, because Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists state that there should be lateral transfer equipment that can lift up to 250 kilos. So that's not even got anything to do with BMI. That's got to do with weight. And that's a big, big, big weight. But people that are far, lighter than that are being told they can't have access to water. So it's ridiculous. Also, obviously, there's going to be plenty of midwives around. Also, there's going to be your birth partner who's not just going to stand there going, oh no, she's gone under the water. Whoopsie day. Like, there are people around. And obviously your birth partner, if that kind of thing did happen, would have such a massive rush of adrenaline. They'd be able to drag you out, drag you wherever they need to drag you to. So it's ridiculous that that's an excuse. And also, how often does that happen? How often does it happen when a person cannot get out of the water themselves with zero warning? I think that's a very, 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 very rare situation to occur. So to put that on people is like planting more seeds of fear, which we know we don't need. We know that's bad for our hormones. We know we don't need anything else going on in our brains. So that's the first thing that comes up a lot. We won't be able to get you out of the water in an emergency. But also, even if someone was really slim and they were unconscious, that would be the only time you wouldn't be able to get out of the water yourself, surely, or semi-conscious. Anyone's going to be heavy because it's going to be dead weight. It's going to be like they're going to be slippery because they're going to be wet. It would be hard to get someone out however much they weighed in that kind of situation. Another thing that comes up a lot is that we'll want to do continuous monitoring throughout your entire labour, which, again, we know latest research shows that continuous monitoring does not improve outcomes. Okay, generally that study talks about not improving outcomes in like healthy pregnancies, healthy births, straightforward, Having a high BMI doesn't mean you're not healthy, doesn't mean it's not a straightforward pregnancy and birth. It's, the majority of the time we do have completely straightforward pregnancies and births. So it would be the same for us as anybody else. So we don't have to have continuous monitoring because we know it doesn't help, and we know it increases the risk of needing a cesarean, which is highly likely because, hindered movement. They're annoying for everybody because they move, they lose the heartbeat, they look like they're not helpful at all. So that's not even an excuse either. But those are the ones that come up the most.
They'd want you on labour ward as well, wouldn't they? If you were having continual monitoring, CTG monitoring, that wouldn't be in the birth centre, that would be on labour ward. They'd want you on labour ward because you're deemed high risk.
Exactly. So they're almost steering people away from birth centres and water because they just want you in the labour ward. Because that also brings up a whole different set of things that people are advised to. Things like a lot of plus size people are sent for appointments with an anaesthetist while they're pregnant. And that's because a lot of people get told they should have an epidural on arrival to the labour ward. And anyone I've spoken to about it, and even some people have told me their anaesthetists have been completely honest with them and said it's because it's more convenient when you're not having so many contractions. So it's awful, almost implying you're going to need or want an epidural because you're fat, and also just making someone feel like that's something they have to do, when obviously that can have massive impact on our labor, because we, you know, if we want to be mobile, if we don't want to have a needle in our back the whole time.
Well, we don't want the drugs. I mean,
exactly.
There's fentanyl in an epidural. I mean, there are substances which you may not want in your body during pregnancy and birth.
Yeah, of course. And it's beyond me that they're happy to shove a needle in your back as soon as you arrive, but they're not happy for you to have a bath. A bath is too risky. A bath is too dangerous. But needle in your back, that's all right. Pethidine, that's all right too. Let's get off our tits. That's fine.
Have some medical grade heroin, but no, you can't get in a warm bath.
Exactly. But no baths, no, dangerous, ridiculous. Yeah, makes no sense whatsoever. But again, I almost feel like it's okay. It's almost like playing on insecurities, I feel. And it's like, it obviously is part of just like a bigger problem with fat phobia, but playing on people's insecurities. Okay, these people are already vulnerable because they're pregnant. They're even more vulnerable because they're plus size and have been taught their whole lives that being plus size must mean bad, unhealthy, lazy, incapable, body doesn't work properly. Let's manipulate that and be the puppet masters of how they give birth. It's like patriarchal issues, and it's just gross and it's not acceptable. But more and more people are fighting it now, I think. And it's nice. It's nice that people have started to say, well, actually, that's bullshit.
Yeah. And I think funneling people away from places like birth centres and midwifery-led units, which are going to support physiology, and pushing them towards a labour ward where they're going to experience more medical intervention. The environment is less optimal. It's going to increase chances of complications because of that cascade of intervention. You almost have to wonder why, if they're telling you you're high risk, they are putting you in an environment that is going to cause more risk, because you would be at less risk birthing in a pool on a midwifery-led unit than on labour ward, where you're more likely to end up with all of these medications, drugs, cascade of forceps, epidural, unplanned C-section, because of the environment that you're in and the mindset in that environment. It doesn't make sense. It really doesn't.
Yeah, it's interesting that you've said that. So statistically, plus size people are more likely to have longer labours, interventions, cesareans. However, there is a study that shows that plus size people who birth in birth centres, MLUs, are the same as everyone else with regards to the length of their labours. And that's basically reflective of everything that you've just said, that we're like people are being sent to that environment that isn't good for giving birth in. It's not a good environment to give birth in, but they're being sent there, and then obviously, as this study shows, it's essentially causing the problems that they're trying to avoid.
I know, make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
So if you're a pregnant person, you are classed as high BMI, you go to your appointments, you get offered all these extra tests and all these extra scans, and then you say that you have a wish to give birth on the midwifery-led unit or in the birth center, and you get told no, you can't have your water birth, you can't birth in the midwifery-led unit. What do? Like, how do they achieve their water birth? If they're really passionate and they really want access to water, what are their options? How can they get that?
So the first thing I would do is mention it as early as possible in your pregnancy that you want to use the midwife-led unit or water birth, whatever. Mention it as early as possible, and don't let anyone fob you off and say, oh, we'll discuss that near your due date. You don't need to worry about that just yet. Mention it as early as possible, and who do I need to speak to about this? Ask, who do I need to speak to about this? Because that way, if there are any policies in place, if there are any issues, you've got plenty of time to do whatever you need to do to get the birth that you want. Okay, so from there, you could speak to lead midwife. It might be worth as well getting an advocate in with you. Is it midwifery advocate they're called? In with you, just so that you've got someone on the inside who's also got your back. They're, really handy that person is there, but not many people seem to know that person even exists. So you can always ask for them to be present in the meeting, and go in there armed with evidence. We shouldn't have to go and say, we shouldn't have to have a meeting about why we should be allowed, why fat babes should be allowed to give birth how we want. It's gross. We shouldn't have to do it. But unfortunately, that's the reality of it at the moment. So go armed with evidence. Go with all your notes saying this, that, and the other, how these environments support physiology, that you want to have a physiological birth, that water is a fantastic form of pain relief, great for relaxation, great for birthing hormones. Go armed with all the information and go into that meeting expecting the best, but absolutely being prepared for the worst in case you need to be, just in case you do need to fight for it. Lots of people have told me they've had these meetings and generally they've been great, but they've been asked to show that they can get in and out of the pool. For me, that's really gross, because okay, perform for us. Show us what you can do. Show us that you're not just exactly proper that. It's awful, but the majority of people are willing to do it because they want the birth that they want. Really, everyone should have to do that then, surely, because again, being slim doesn't mean you're fit and strong and healthy. Same when they're being plus size doesn't mean every stereotype about being plus size. So it's gross, but lots of people are willing to do it. So be prepared in case that does come up too. But definitely meeting with head midwife, have someone there who's got your back, go armed with all the information, all the evidence, just so that you can use it if you need to use it.
So hopefully that works. And I'm sure it does work for some people. Well, what if they still say no? Then what are your options if you're still being told no, you can't use the pool, you can't use the midwifery-led unit?
Obviously, home birth is an option, and let's face it, home birth really is the only way that you can absolutely 100% guarantee that you get access to water anyway. Because exactly, for anybody, because labor, everywhere, midwife-led units only have a limited number of pools. There's not one in every room. It's not like a hotel where every room has a bath. There's a limited number. So
and
even if you
guarantee that it's open either, because a lot of them get shut.
Exactly. So really the only way you can absolutely guarantee that you'll get your water birth is a home birth. So don't be scared of that being an option for you. I think a lot of people are scared because we have a lot of high risk thrown in our face, so that plants seeds of doubt in our mind. But if you've had a completely straightforward pregnancy, why wouldn't you have a completely straightforward birth? Birthing at home is safe. It's actually far safer than giving birth in a hospital. We know statistically it's far safer, and you're far less likely to have interventions, complications, blah 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 at home. So home birth is absolutely an option for you. And then you can hire a pool, you can buy a pool, you can use your own bath, you can do whatever you like because it's your space. And really, that's the only way to guarantee a water birth.
Yeah.
You can also speak to birth rights, but things are a little wishy-washy around the use of water. So they may be able to help you a little, but they may not. But it's always worth speaking to them anyway, just to get any further information around the use of water.
And to let the head of midwifery know that you are speaking to birth rights and that you do know what your rights are, I think is worthwhile. I do, I'm not saying that you have to go guns blazing and be, up for a fight and to, be really aggressive, but sometimes you do have to call their bluff. And I've had clients who have called, the trust's bluff. If you're being told that you can't use the birth center or the midwifery led unit, and you say, well, fine, I'm having a home birth, and they say you can't have a home birth because you're high risk, well then, so simply asking the question, how are you going to support me to get the birth that I want and deserve? Because if you're not going to let me birth in water on your midwifery-led unit, I will be birthing at home. And if you are not going to support my home birth, I will be free birthing without your support. So therefore, you are putting me at risk because you're telling me I'm high risk. So how are you going to help me achieve having a safe birth? Because honestly, like if they're saying you're that high risk and they are forcing you, the only way that you get access to water is to completely opt out of all care, then they are putting you at risk, right? So you need to call their bluff.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I discussed this on my course that sometimes have it ready to pull out the bag in case you need to. Because even if you have zero intention to free birth, let's face it, we know they're terrified of it. We know they're terrified of it. So have it there to pull out of the bag if you need to, because they're not going to want you to. They'll be terrified of the thought of you doing that. So yeah, you can absolutely call their bluff and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And they will probably shit their pants.
And I mean, and that's not, again, it's not just with having high BMI, that's with any kind of, risk factor, like going overdue.
Yeah.
One of my clients, she was very, very clear that she was not going to be induced and she was having a home birth. And she got to 42 weeks and they were like, you're not having a home birth. And she's like, I am having a home birth. I will stay at home and you will send someone or I will free birth. And she got to 44 weeks and went into labor and called them and said, I'm in labor. I'm not coming in. Are you sending anyone? And they sent someone.
Of course.
Sometimes you do have to just stick to your guns and they will support your preferences. I think they play on the fact, or they rely on the fact that putting fear into us will make us comply. And I think for a lot of people, it does result in compliance, and then resulting regret later because we were forced down a road that we didn't want to go down. And I think it's abhorrent that somebody who is classed as high BMI is pushed down these routes because it derails their births.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Like, so much nonsense comes up. Like, I have so many people contact me who feel amazing, feel confident, feel brilliant, and then they get to 37 weeks and the talk of induction starts randomly out of nowhere because pregnancy's been textbook up until that point, but then suddenly BMI, risk, this, that, and the other, stillbirth, literally, so they can go all the way up to that point, everything being perfect, BMI being hardly mentioned other than GTT, growth scans, blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly railroaded, plans completely changed because it's like, what if those seeds of fear they plant get in? Can be real hard to get them back out. Okay, and so that can absolutely change someone's birth. And then a few months down the line, that's when conversations start coming out of, I wish I wish I had done this, or I wish I had done that. And it's gross. It shouldn't be happening. It's like people have gone power mad. They just want to control everything. And it makes no sense because it's causing more harm than good, considering that we know the highest cause of death within a year of giving birth is suicide. There seems to be very, very, very little regard for mental health. Even the way that some plus size pregnant people are spoken to through their pregnancies, zero shit's given about mental health of these people, and it's horrendous and like beyond me that people speak to people like this.
Zero. I think when it comes to fat phobia and discrimination against fat people, I think language is really important. And I think quite often people are spoken to in an inappropriate manner. They are made to feel less than because they are plus sized. And I would really pull them up on it, to be honest, because, you know, if you don't, then things don't change. And it's interesting that you said, you know, about your clients and they feel great about their pregnancies until they hit 37 weeks. And we know that that's when you start having your birth preferences chat. And as you approach 40 weeks, and the conversations start to turn more towards medical interventions and induction. And that's across any pregnancy, you know, approach your due date. One thing that I tell all of my clients is to record your antenatal appointments.
Definitely.
And quite often I get told, oh, but my midwife's lovely, and you know, all my appointments have been lovely. And I'm like, yeah, but you've been in early pregnancy and you've been fine up to this point. But as you approach 36, 37, 38, you know, getting towards 40 weeks or over, those conversations can change. And that's where you need to start, I think, recording those conversations, not just for not to be, again, not to be confrontational, not to make it this awkward situation. You can pose it in a nice way. You know, I'm not going to remember, I've got baby brain, I'm not going to remember everything I'm going to say. I just want to record it so I can listen to it later. My birth partner's not here, I just want to record it so that he or she can listen to it later. But I do think it's necessary because it will also halt any fat phobic conversation, any inappropriate language, any misinformation, because that happens often, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. Like I've even had a client who wanted a water birth, but was told she had a big baby. It didn't turn out to be big, but she was told by a consultant, "Oh, we can't let you have a water birth because the birth pool might go through the ceiling." And I was like, what? Yeah, what is the integrity of the building that poor that you would say something like this? But how many other times has that consultant said that to people, that you're so big it's going to go through this, you know, it's going to go through the floor? Like the stuff that people are told is unbelievable, but this is what comes out people's mouths. And I absolutely agree with you. I recommend on my course recording every single interaction with any healthcare professional. So midwife, consultant, sonographer even, because a lot of sonographers, there's a lot of stories about sonographers.
Going for scans is something that I hear from high BMI clients. It can be really, really hard, you know, as in physical bruises, you know, treated really poorly. You're right, you should be recording those interactions and have evidence, because some of those experiences and interactions are horrific. And again, I'm not saying that every single person is going to experience this,
of course,
but you don't know until it happens, right?
Yeah, I think it's worth recording your appointments anyway so you can listen back to them, because sometimes we can be so blindsided with science or with words we don't know or don't understand. It's nice to listen back to it, so then we can just be like, okay, now I'm going to look that up. Okay, just so you can kind of go over it again and think if you have any questions that you didn't ask at the time that you can go back and ask later. I think it's definitely worth it for lots of reasons, but for us in particular, to protect ourselves from any fat phobia, so that if we do need to have people held accountable for how they speak to us and for the things they come out with, we've got it right there. We've got the conversation right there. so that we can protect ourselves and then protect future plus size people against this kind of thing. Like, I've had so many people who message me on Instagram who say, oh, I read your post, and then I said that to a midwife, and then the midwife said, oh, I've never thought about it that way before. And I was thinking, oh, lovely, because at least they've said, I've never thought about it that way before. So that person who called it out has planted a seed of growth in that midwife's brain. Maybe she will not say it again because she just had never thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
So it's always worth calling stuff out too. Like you said earlier, it's definitely worth calling stuff out because most of the time it's shit. And most of the time, because they've been trained by a fat phobic institution, they haven't had reason to think outside that box necessarily. So call them up on it, and that could make a massive difference for both your care going forward and other plus size people who come across that healthcare provider.
And it is institutionalized. You know, it's not necessarily down to the fault of individuals always. It is affected by guidelines and policy. You know, we were discussing this week the social media post that NICE, you know, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, put on Instagram, you know, which they took down and replaced it with a new one on both on high BMI. I mean, the second one wasn't much improvement, to be honest, but it just reflects how fat phobic and how problematic the approach and the guidelines and the policies are at an institutional level when it comes to high BMI.
Yeah, well, remember in 2021, the proposed guidelines change around induction. So that included fat people, people over the age of 35, people who have IVF or any kind of fertility treatment, people that aren't white. All of these are really ingrained institutional issues, fat phobic, racist, homophobic, you know, ageist, massive issues. And that was NICE that put that out there. And obviously outrage didn't happen, but the fact that they put it out there in the first place almost shows, rather than doing some work and trying to change the system, trying to be forward thinking, trying to be better, let's throw induction at it. Let's throw induction at it instead. And it really brought all the problems to the forefront. It's all vanished again. Like, you know, it's all, you know, because they didn't put it out there to induce all those people at 37 weeks.
But it's happening because they wanted to do it. It is happening, you know.
Yeah.
I've had people say, I've been told I need to be induced because I'm black and I'm higher risk. So even if it's not written in black and white in the guidelines, it's out there.
Yeah, it was already out there before the NICE guidelines, let's face it. It was already out there because the problems were already there. They're still there. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's already there. And I'm hoping that people like us are making an impact and making people see that they don't need to follow those guidelines, don't need to follow the hospital policy. They do not need to say yes. It's hard on doing everything we've ever learned, which is to be compliant, nod, smile, say yes, take the drugs that we're told to take or whatever. But we don't have to. We don't have to keep that cycle of compliance with, you know, any medical professional going like that.
So what are the benefits of giving birth in water? Because we've talked a lot about, you know, how to achieve your water birth and why you might get told not to have a water birth. But there's huge benefits from giving birth in water, isn't there?
Yeah, massive benefits of having a water birth. We know it's a wonderful form of pain relief, really, and you know, an absolutely incredible form of pain relief. It's also really good for our birth hormones too, because it helps you to stay calm and relaxed. Think every time you have a bath or even a shower, just having running water going over your skin, how much better it can make you feel. That's exactly what we want when we're giving birth. Also, for us as plus size people, it makes us buoyant. We're more buoyant. So it seems ridiculous that on the one hand, they think, oh, they're plus size. They, you know, their body doesn't work. They must be able to hardly move. But then they don't want us to birth in water where we're floating around. like where water can help us move and help us be weightless. So it makes no sense. But it's great because anyone of any size during pregnancy can get aches and pains and feel uncomfortable. So water's really great at taking the weight off of us and helping us to feel more comfortable in our pregnant body, which can be sore, which can be uncomfortable. So there's so many benefits to birthing in water. I would love to have birth in water. It would have been fabulous to birth in water. So definitely something, or definitely a pain relief option at least, or a comfort measure that's worth considering. Because think of it as like being in a spa, but a baby coming out of you at the same time. Fabulous. What, like, who wouldn't want to give birth in water like that?
Yeah. And it is ironic, we get told when you have high BMI that you can't birth in water, because that buoyancy is going to facilitate movement, and
Yeah,
movement is really important, getting into different birth positions. Quite often people with high BMI are told they have a risk of high blood pressure. Birthing in water lowers your blood pressure.
exactly.
It just, like, I mean, they could fire off a ton of reasons and you could literally tick everyone off and argue against it and go, but that doesn't make sense. There
Yeah.
really isn't a reason to deny somebody access to a pool if they have a higher BMI.
No, there really isn't. The other day when I was talking about this, someone said, so there's no reason why I can't give birth in water. I was like, no, no, there's no actual reason why you can't. It's all this may happen or that may happen, and this and that could happen to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also an
How many
incredibly low risk.
Yeah, exactly. How many times has it actually happened?
Exactly. I bet it's like, that's
Right?
another thing. Ask.
Yeah.
That's another thing you could do in these appointments. If someone says, oh, but this might happen. Okay, how many times have you seen that happen? How many times? What is the national average number of times for that to happen in in a hospital? Is there, a very high amount here? Why is that? Like, ask questions. Question when people say things that just sound stupid, because most of the time it's bullshit. If it sounds bullshit, it is. Let's face it, it is. If someone says, oh, but you might drown, you might go under the water, we might be able to get you out. Okay, how many times does that happen? Oh, well, exactly.
And also,
Exactly.
what policies do you have to mitigate that happening then? Because anybody could go unconscious, like you said earlier. So you must have policies and procedures in place if somebody
Yeah,
passes out and they're in the pool. So what would you do? And why can you not do that to somebody who is bigger?
exactly. And also, like, say we won't be able to get out, we'll float to the top and we can be floating out.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, none of it makes sense. It's all ridiculous, but just get what you want. Just got, like, if you are set on a water birth, get it.
Push it.
You can get it. You can speak to the right people. You can have the right conversations. You can go armed with the correct information and sufficient information that would make zero sense for them to say no to.
So if people want the correct information, where can they find you so that they can access that information?
I've written a blog. I've actually written a blog on this subject, which is on my website, which is plussizepregnancy.co.uk. I've also got loads of Instagram posts about water birth because it comes up so often. So that's just at plus size pregnancy, all one word. But if you need any help with anything, just message me. My DMs are always open as well. And I'm happy to talk to people about anything plus size pregnancy related, because you're not on your own and you can get support. I also have a Facebook group, actually, so plus size pregnancy community group, and it's great. Everyone, like, I was dreading starting a Facebook group because I thought it would be the bane of my life. It really isn't. Everyone is so lovely. Everyone's really supportive. Everyone in there even shares evidence-based information, so it's not like I have to go in and say this is shit, take it out. Everyone is doing it, so it's fantastic seeing so many people. I think there's nearly 900 people in there now. So many people in there talking about evidence-based information and how they're getting the birth they want. It's lovely. So you can find me all over the place. But this particularly, yeah, there is a blog on my website.
And they need to go and do a course with you as well.
That would be nice. Yes, you can do a course with me and learn. Yeah.
With you, and I think it would be massively valuable to be doing a course.
Yeah. Yeah. My course, so fully comprehensive hypnobirthing course written specifically for plus size pregnant people. So we can cover the stuff that does come up for us. It may come up for you, it may not. It's likely at least one thing that's related to being plus size is going to come up at some point. So it's definitely worth getting as informed as possible about it, because then when you're informed, you've got power, because then you know if someone's chatting nonsense to you, you know what your rights are, you know what you can do about it. So yeah, come along to one of my courses. It would be lovely.
And you're lovely.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really hope this will be really helpful for anybody listening, and everyone needs to go and give you a follow because you're amazing, and I appreciate
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.